Welcome back to Elm Elaborates. This is Season 1, Episode 7, Getting to the Punch. As always, I'm here with Ryan Bono, and we're going to be talking about that critical point in any build where we get to the punch list and, we are almost done. Like, when you get to that punch list, you're like, we're so close. It's right there, the finish line. I can see it. Let's talk about getting to that punch list.
Yeah, it takes a while to get to the punch.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so when we buy the building and we're in for permitting, occasionally some jurisdictions will allow us to do work before we actually get the permits in hand.
Yeah.
So, basically getting to the punch list, you should have about 70 to 80% done. Well, it all starts with, 1%, right? So sometimes that could happen before you get permits. Sometimes they make you wait till you have all the permits in hand and then you can start work. Florence is a great example where we're allowed to start demo before we actually get the permits. So that's a really a nice thing. Sometimes it does give us a little bit of a head start, lets us get momentum, see what the bones are when we're working with, especially when we pull down all the walls and, all the various things that have been left behind in a stacked warehouse that is kind of vacant.
Obviously, we're going to ask the jurisdiction at the same time, like, hey, can we go ahead and apply for this demo permit? Because we want to get the ball rolling. Like, it's a race against the clock. Once we close on a building, it's like, okay, we're shooting for 6 months. We got 120 days that we need to be almost to storage walls and doors. So what's going to get us there faster is going to be demo. And getting that ball rolling on demo is key. So as permitting is going through, we're trying to work on our demo permit. We get our contractors lined up, and that's interior demo. That's starting the roof if we're going to redo that. But it's really much getting the place, getting ready for overheads.
Yeah, and occasionally they'll also let you pull a standalone roof permit, which is really nice.
Yeah.
To get the roof done, because roof is really a maintenance thing. Like, you don't always, you have to replace your roof depending on the roof system, but usually every 15 to 25 years.
Yeah.
So when you go to the jurisdiction, you could be like, hey, I need a maintenance roof permit.
Smart
they
tactic
don't
there,
always,
Ryan.
yeah, they don't always tack that along with your building permit. So demo and that is usually what they'll give you the thumbs up on before you get your full building permit. So some buildings that are pre-1978, the years are a little bit fuzzy because 1978 is really when everybody started to find out about asbestos, but there was a problem that some people had stacks and stacks of asbestos material on their shelves, and if they weren't able to use it, they'd be put out of business. So it's really roughly around like 1981, anything before that, we really look around for asbestos. The problem with not paying attention to the asbestos and start moving forward with construction, obviously you can have airborne asbestos, which we don't want. And the second thing is, if we ever wanted to abate the asbestos material after people have moved in, all the storage units are in there, people's belongings are being stored there. If we wanted to abate it then, it's a huge process.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even want to know what that would look like. So we have asbestos contractors come out and take a look around and test, anything that looks suspicious and give us a report back. So that's something that we always want to do on the front end, because if we do identify there's asbestos there, somewhere in the demo phase, we actually shut the job site down and only the asbestos contractors are on site. Except sometimes we can still do roof if there's no open roof penetrations and whatnot. So it's pretty much a full job site shutdown when we have asbestos on the site.
The projects that we've taken on so far, what is like the most common thing that you've seen asbestos involved in?
Yeah, a lot of times you see the old pipes wrapped with insulation that kind of looks like a cast. Like if you break your arm, it's kind of got this cast look. It's a little bit smoother than maybe what a traditional cast looks like. But that's something that, through experience, I can tell that a lot of times there's a certain look to it where you're like, okay, there's a good chance that's asbestos.
Yeah.
There's also certain size tiles on the ground that, these 9x9 tiles, or there's other small tiles too, small format tiles that are usually contain asbestos, given a certain look. But those are usually the two, flooring and pipe wrap.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've taken the asbestos out.
Mm-hmm.
Now what are we doing? We got some electricity in the air.
Yeah, that could be dangerous, right?
That could be.
Yeah, so typically somewhere in the demo area, we also have electricians come in and demo out any live power. So they'll go to the main panel, shut them down, start there, test all the circuits, then pull away any circuits that are not going to be used in the future, and basically what we call make safe.
Yeah.
It's basically just making sure that the electrical power has been turned off, meters are pulled out, and that anybody cutting through a random pipe, because you'd be surprised how many random pipes are
Yeah.
just hanging around these old abandoned warehouses. You could cut through a live conduit and then hit that wire. So that's why we like to make the job site safe as far as electrical is concerned, right in the front end.
Yeah, very key because like this building's probably gone through 3 or 4 changes of use.
Yeah.
You got conduit everywhere, wires everywhere. We really want to identify what, especially since we're about to do a change of use on it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of going simplicity.
Yeah.
We're going minimizing everything. So I think that's one of the more challenging thing. And John Service, shout out again, always. He's really good at that.
Yeah, I mean, you have these old panels that could be from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and you can just tell they're different age, different size breakers in there, different brands. You could just tell that, somebody one day decided, in 1958 that they wanted a couple outlets over there, and then that was added on, and then 1972 they wanted a new panel over here, and then they added on. And it's just very confusing when you break down these electrical panels to try to understand what's going where, because it is a code requirement to label all your breakers, but these people probably didn't get permits, and they probably didn't get inspections, and they definitely don't label the breakers and or the panels, so that makes our job a lot harder.
Or the code has changed over the years along with
true.
the building. That always makes it more fun.
Yeah.
And then now we have this beautiful site. We got some asbestos demoed.
Yeah.
We got some make safe. Now we want to make secure.
Yeah. So during the demo phase, keeping the job site secure, it is important.
Absolutely.
But once we start getting all the expensive equipment on the job site, especially if we start to stage the stuff like outside or anywhere, this is where it really gets kind of tricky with job site security, right? We don't want anyone wandering on our job and getting hurt, and that's pretty easy to do with locking the doors and whatnot. But then once people in the area start to notice that you're starting to bring materials to the job site, like electrical conduit, copper
stuff.
wiring, condensers that contain copper and all that kind of stuff, they start to notice. And so really on some job sites, we've even hired part-time and sometimes full-time security guards. Macon is a good example of that. When we started construction there, the guy next door let us know that, his store, they just cut into his metal siding, just cut a door right into his metal siding. They stole his condensers, which were on the ground, then they put them on the roof. And then after they were on the roof, they didn't like that. They couldn't get onto his roof, so they just took a cutter, cut a doorway into his siding, and just walked on into his building. They didn't even hardly take anything.
Yeah.
They just wanted to see what was in there. So that's the tricky thing for us is, people just wanting the stuff that we buy, because it is expensive stuff. So security guards and or like in Kernersville, we took a whole room and we boarded it up, and we put it's inside the building, and we dedicated a room, and we basically secured this whole room off with our condensers, our copper, line sets, all that kind of stuff. Insulation, pipe insulation now is extremely expensive. It used to not be. So the theft is something that we always have to keep in mind. And you're always like, oh, it won't happen to us. It sure
happens.
does, and you'll see people poking around and whatnot. So that is something that you don't think of. Like when you think of construction, you don't think of having to hide your materials, and that is absolutely something that we have to contend with.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to plan for, especially the thievery. But we do our best.
Yeah, it depends on how determined they are. Right?
Yeah, sometimes they are determined.
Yeah. Yes.
So now we're hoping, the stars align, our schedule aligns. We got our demo permit. We are ending towards the end of demo, and we get our full permit. Now it's like, okay, what do we focus on here? Our heads go up, and we go, okay, everything overhead. Let's get because there's going to be storage everywhere. It's going to fill this whole building. So we got to get everything that's going to be impeded by overhead. Like, let's knock this out.
Yeah. So if you imagine, obviously the open warehouse, working overhead is very easy.
Yeah.
You work on the fire sprinklers, electrical, your HVAC, all that stuff that's overhead is extremely accessible. As soon as you start putting in the storage hallways and doors, and mind you, we are trying to get the most amount of net rentable square
Yeah.
footage. So we are packing units
Yeah.
in there. So as soon as we start installing these storage hallways and doors, like a lot of this stuff is no longer accessible. It'll take our crews, our subcontractors, so much more time to weave around our storage. And also, when they bring, we generally don't allow lifts into our warehouses after we start installing storage hallways and doors because people aren't paying attention and they
Bang it up.
they ram right into our unit, our brand new units, and obviously that doesn't look so good.
That's
So,
heartache.
yeah, so it's a mad rush after demo to get all the overheads done: electrical, fire sprinkler, and the HVAC for the most part. There's other small things, especially if we're painting overhead. We want to get that done too. But yeah, that's the main concern.
Yeah.
So now all the overheads are done, and
Yes.
what's next?
Oh, we're getting storage hallways and doors in.
What does that look? How many trucks is that? What does that look like?
Oh, that's a good question. I've
Yeah.
never been there for actual delivery,
Yeah.
but I would imagine a lot of trucks.
It's mayhem. Yeah. Yeah, especially when they stack them up. So it's nice when the delivery is like 2 to 3 hours apart.
Yeah.
Because they only have so many forklifts on site. Sometimes they have the piggybacks on the back of the trailers where they could help offload. But when we have like 3 or 4 trucks and 1 forklift, it's not fun.
Can you imagine Kernersville? Kernersville
Yeah.
is going to be nuts.
Yes. Good thing is that we do have a loading dock in the basement.
Yes, that is true.
However, there's no loading dock on the second floor. I'll tell you that right now.
No. We
Yeah.
have a freight elevator.
Yes, we do have a freight elevator and we do have regular elevators.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot of material. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. 'Cause, I mean, we're talking like liner panels. We're talking mesh for the top. We're talking all the tracks.
Doors, different size doors.
Oh yeah.
Bottom tracks, headers, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, the amount of materials that come to the job site is substantial.
Yeah.
And not only do they have to take it, pull it off the truck, but immediately they have to inventory everything.
Yeah.
So that's the responsibility of the subcontractor. But if they don't do that and they start installing and they get 60% the way through and they're missing a part, then their labor crew has to leave and come back, and they don't like to do that. That's why it's really good for them to inventory everything as soon as it hits the job site, so they know if anything was left off the delivery, and then they could order it then, and then fix that.
That's a good point. I got to think about that.
Yeah. So like they install roughly like 7,000 to 10,000 square foot per week.
Yeah.
So these guys move it extremely fast. That's a 50,000 square foot warehouse. That's a big warehouse. They can do that in probably 5 weeks pretty easily, especially if the layout's pretty simple.
Yeah.
So if they're missing some parts and pieces, it's going to hold them up quick. So they got to know right away as soon as they hit the job site.
That makes sense. And I would say so once storage and hallways and doors, they kind of arrive on site, that's a good indicator. That's a ping to the PM like, oh, all right, I'm getting ready to go do a punch. Because, there's probably like an initial punch before that just with all the overheads. Like, hey, let's make sure all this is taken care of and we're about to be on the cusp of delivery here. Let's make sure we've gotten everything that we want done, completed. And then those doors in, that's like another ping like, hey, you're probably like 2 weeks out from doing another little preliminary punch.
Exactly. I think with conversions, we have more punch lists than a new construction because there's so many odd corners and pipes hanging down and random things that we find along the way. I would say probably we're roughly, probably 4 to 5 punch lists by the time a project's over, which is the hardest part because the number one thing about a punch list is tracking this thing because it could have, depending on the phase of construction, it could have anywhere from probably 30 is pretty much the minimum to like 150 items.
I would say also depends on who's writing it. If Ryan's writing it, you're looking at an easy 120.
Yeah.
Easy.
So, the first one I ever did for Elm Builders was I think it was 156.
Good night.
Yeah. So, and that's just one punch list, right?
Yeah.
So as we go through the stages, like one punch list to get 156 items done is really difficult. Some of them are little piddly stuff that subcontractors don't want to come back for. Other things are pretty big things that take some time. So by the time we finish one punch list or come close to, we have almost definitely started another one. So the most important thing is tracking one list. And you don't want to have 4 or 5 lists that nobody knows where it's at. It's all about closing out those items and combining them and making one master punch list. And I think that follows through to pretty much right up to the day that we get CO is, following all this stuff and making sure it's all getting done. Because, like I said, conversions, there's just so many items to contend with.
Yeah.
It's not a traditional one punch list. Like when you build a home, you have a punch list. Oh, there's a nick here. There's somebody's got to install this towel bar here. It's like that. It's not that kind of stuff. It's did we check that the sump pumps are on the backup generator? Super important, right?
Yeah.
Like, did we check all the mag locks for the doors? Why isn't this access door installed? Like all that kind of stuff comes into our punch list. I mean, there's so many other things. I mean, as far as punch list, but
and I mean, just because we have a sister company, no matter who is our client, pretty much we're just construction guys. So we'll create punch lists, but we'll also at some point bring the clients back in city storage and say, hey, let's also walk this together, because I mean, ultimately they're taking it over. It's going to be their product to then
exactly.
So we got to make sure they're happy with what we did.
City storage needs it to be extremely functional and efficient. Nomad likes it to be visually, aesthetically pleasing, and we want it to be obviously cost effective and done. So it's like you have all of these different facets, and everyone's got a different lens. They're looking through a different lens. So that's why actually just last week we had City Storage, Nomad Capital, and Elm Builders doing a walk on Kernsville to start a punch list.
Yeah, which was awesome, because on Monday, all I got was all these punch list items. So.
That's right.
It was fun.
It's got to be done.
It's
definitely not the sexy part of construction, but it is a crucial point to making sure that, you open the doors and everything is functioning and watertight. And
because the last thing you want to do is have City Storage take over this, and then, something's wrong.
Yeah, they're like, why doesn't the elevator work?
It's like, oh, shoot, we should have checked that.
Yeah.
Did you try 2?
Yeah.
Did you hit the button?
Yeah. Did you press star?
Yeah.
So that's just a really crucial part to our construction process. Cameron, how do we get subcontractors to actually fulfill the punch list that we implement? Because I know we make a bunch of lists, and some things seem small, some things seem large. Like, who's responsible for following up on the subcontractors, and what point of leverage do we use for that as well?
That is a great question, Ryan. I'm glad you asked it. First, I'm just going to say it's going to be great communication and just great relationships between the trades. We have a lot of trades that follow us from job to job. So obviously just building that trust and building that relationship, like, hey, we're good for it, kind of thing. But also another thing called retainage. We just like to hold back, like, hey, if you got a full contract amount for $100,000, we're going to hold back 15% just to make sure, like, hey, we want to be satisfied. You guys want to be satisfied. Just make sure the job's complete per the scope of work that we wrote. And so we kind of use that as leverage. We never really have to use it much, just because, once again, I think it's just solely based on building good relationships and making sure that everyone's comfortable.
Yeah.
But you do have those companies out there that are like, nah, and then we just go, you ain't getting your money. You got to make us happy. We're the client.
That usually solves it. It's a common thing in construction, retainage and holding the money back until you and the client are totally satisfied. Because, to be honest, subcontractors, it's all about the speed in which they can do jobs, and then, getting on to the next job. So, if you put yourself in their shoes, it makes sense. I think another important part of it is, like, caring about getting the punch list done. Because if we don't care as a general contractors, they'll pick up on that, and they'll be like, oh, like, they kind of want me to go repaint that wall that really got scuffed up, but I don't know, nobody said something to me in about 2 to 3 weeks. So if you don't bring it up, they're not going to bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a major thing. So compiling it all into one list and making sure that we're on the same page, and our site superintendents are on the same page, and we all agree on getting this punch list done and contacting the right subcontractors and following through, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Caring and executing is a big part of the battle.
Yeah, because if they see us not doing checks, like, hey, we're going to do some work for you, and they do work, and then we don't check it, they're going to pick up on that. Like, these guys don't follow up. Yeah,
they're not. These guys aren't detailed. We don't really have to do all these things that they say. Like, if you're just walking with a subcontractor, and you're like, oh, I wish we would have painted that, or why is that dented, and oh, we gotta get the bathroom hardware installed. Like, if you just say that while you're walking with a subcontractor, you better believe that you'd be lucky if one of those things got done, right?
Yeah.
Like, but if you make a list and you send it to them and you say, hey, by Thursday of next week, we need all 3 of these items to get done. Usually, those things are going to get done, especially if you check in on that Tuesday and, hey, your deadline is Thursday. Usually, you don't have to use the money leverage thing. Usually they know that you're paying attention, so they're going to get it done. And that's the way that you solve 80 to 90% of it.
Yeah, and I would say, what comes out of that a lot of times is, oh, is this a change order? So it's like, oh, you got to make sure your SWOW, your statement of work, is like tight. You got to make sure you're thinking about those little punch items that may come down the road. So I'd say that's probably one of the more difficult things, is especially on rehabs or conversions, is that we don't know what's going to happen down the road. Like, we don't know if we want to add another plumbing fixture, we want to do this. We just got to make sure that, hey, is this part of your original scope and you just missed it and you need to come back and get it corrected, or do we have to do a change order? Which is I would say there's a fine line there.
Yeah. So when we write their contracts, we go into as much detail as we possibly can. Yeah. We reference all the pages on the plans. We attach the plans. We even write, like, they have to use their own equipment. They have to use, they have to provide great supervision, great manpower, all that kind of stuff. We think of everything we possibly can, and then usually, like, if there's a change, right, like, these people need to get paid for the changes that we or the inspector has made. So that's all well and good to make a change order there, but you better believe that sometimes they're like, ooh, I really don't want to do that. Maybe if I make a change order, it'll be worth my time. It's like, no, that was definitely in your original scope of work. Provide all bathroom fixtures per page P.1. It's like, it's right there. You got to provide the water heater. So that's always fun to navigate.
It's so much fun to navigate.
Yeah.
Call me Captain Jack Sparrow. I'm navigating these seas.
And that's a wrap on Season 1, Episode 7, Getting to the Punch. Hopefully we explained what a punch list is and how to track it. I'm Ryan Bono. I'm joined with Cameron Pleasant. Thanks for watching, and catch us on the next one.
Like it.